Hi everyone. In this video, we're going to talk about the scientific method. We're going to talk about what it is, and we're going to look at an example of how it could be used. Now, despite the name, the scientific method isn't only used by scientists. It's really just a logical set of steps that help us to make sense of the world around us. You probably use this method every single day without even thinking about it. And if you don't believe me, let's look at an example that you might be familiar with. We're going to start with our observation. And our observation in this case is very simple, that my phone won't turn on. From this observation, I'm going to ask a question. Why won't my phone turn on? I'm going to come up with a hypothesis that my phone won't turn on because the battery is flat. And from this hypothesis, I can make a prediction. I predict that if I plug in my charger, my phone will start to work. So I do an experiment. I take my phone and I plug in my charger. If my phone now works, my hypothesis was supported. In a scientific experiment, what we're doing is manipulating variables, factors that differ between one group and another. Now, these variables can fall into two main classifications. An independent variable is the thing that gets changed between the groups, the thing that we're testing. The dependent variable is the thing that is measured. It depends on what we did. Now, in a controlled experiment, we only want to test one independent variable at a time so that we can be more certain that the thing we changed had the effect that we measured. If we change too many things at once, we can't know what caused the effect. And so, as far as possible, every variable that we are not testing needs to be controlled. Let's consider an example of how the scientific method could be used. Let's say we have a gardener, and our gardener wants to know if a new fertilizer will improve the growth of their plants. So they decide to test it out using the scientific method. The independent variable, remember the thing that we're changing, in this case, would be the presence or absence of the fertilizer. The dependent variable, the thing that we're measuring, would be the growth of the plants. Now, to ensure that the fertilizer is the thing that had the effect, we have to control our other potential variables. So things like the species of plant, the amount of water, the amount of sunlight, the age of the plants, and even the temperature that they're grown at. Now, I'd like you to pause the video for just a moment and write down a possible hypothesis for this experiment before we move on to look at some results. So here we have some results of our experiment. Now, our hypothetical gardener started with a total of 10 tomato seedlings. Now, those seedlings were all grown from the same seeds. 5 of the seedlings were grown just in soil, 5 were grown in soil with the fertilizer. The plants were kept in the same location to control the amount of sunlight and the temperature, and they were provided with the same amount of water. The height of the plants was measured every 10 days. And on the left, you can see the results. The blue line represents the plants that were grown only in the soil, and the red line represents those that also had the fertilizer. I'd like you to pause the video again for just a moment and answer the question of whether the data supports the hypothesis that you wrote. Now, please know that it is absolutely okay if it doesn't. Hypotheses are proven wrong all the time. We're going to finish up this video with a brief look at the difference between a hypothesis and a scientific theory. Now, on the surface, they might seem like they should be the same. After all, your hypothesis that you wrote down most likely sounded a lot like, I have a theory about that. Now, in science, a hypothesis is a proposed explanation for an observation. It's what we think caused the thing to happen. Consider the hypothesis that you wrote down earlier. You came up with an idea based on what you know about the effects of fertilizer on plant growth. That hypothesis was testable. An experiment could be performed to see whether or not that proposed explanation fits the data. In fact, one of the things that makes a hypothesis is that it can be proven wrong. It's important to remember, though, that we can't prove a hypothesis to be true. The more data we have, the more strongly we can support it, but it can never be definitively proven. There is always another possible explanation somewhere out there that we didn't test. A scientific theory, on the other hand, is much broader in scope than a hypothesis. It's more of an umbrella idea that can itself lead to multiple new hypotheses and is supported already by a large body of evidence. For example, the image on the right here illustrates what we call cell theory, which states that all living things are made of cells and that cells can only come from other cells. They can't spontaneously materialize. Now, of course, scientists haven't looked at every cell that has ever existed, but all of the experiments that have been performed provide evidence that supports this theory. From this, we can come up with an almost unlimited number of specific hypotheses about cells and how they work that we can then test using the scientific method like we looked at in the previous slides. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope that you've had a chance to check out the other videos in this section. If not, please feel free to do so.